Hello and welcome to the Hormone Genius podcast. Thank you for being with us here today. And we're very excited to have a special guest with us, Ellen Virginia, AKA Cheerleader of the Heart, which I just absolutely love. I got that from her website, yoketothehealer.com. Ellen is a wonderful woman, and I am so excited that we can be with her today to discuss so many things that are close to her heart, but mostly because she is a woman I feel that has been through so much and has wisdom to share with us from her many experiences of being a mother, of going through loss, of carrying children, of suffering through health disorders like polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, thyroid issues, postpartum depression, autoimmune disease. And Ellen has really kind of come out as a champion and continues to kind of fight for her own health. And she works with women now in a new, I think, adventure she started called Paraclete Coaching. So we'll let her tell us about that new adventure. But Ellen, we just want to thank you for being with us and spending time with us today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Such an honor to be here.
Well, Ellen, so I'm excited to interview you because I heard you speak your full story on YouTube, and it just moved me to tears, quite literally. So I would love for you to share with us a little bit about you and what makes you so passionate about the feminine design.
Thank you. Yeah, like I said, it's such an honor to be here. And I'm so humbled to be sharing my story because it's really not a story about me. It's a story about how God has brought me through so much, and his Blessed Mother, our Blessed Mother, has carried me through so much. So I am a wife to Jacob and mom to four littles who I like to say at one time were four under four, because it is a big part of our story that we had four babies in 4 years. And I currently homeschool them, and now they are 7, 6, 5, and almost 4. Mm-hmm. So it's a really fun, full-time, busy household. But I absolutely love it. So I would love to dive into my story, if that's where you want me to start. Just a real quick overview of kind of where we started, and then I'll dig into it and unpack it a little bit. So I met my husband in college, and I majored in hospitality and event design, which I absolutely loved. And it really matched my personality. And now I see, as a mom and being in ministry, how much the Lord used my feminine design and everything that he put into my own heart to just bring about so much fulfillment in my life, planning events now in ministry and with my kids and with my family. It's really such a gift to see that even though I've moved on from that time in my life of what I used my degree for and the jobs that I had, it's still part of my life. The Lord's just using it in different ways. So I like to think of that, especially, I don't know, I hope that anyone listening today can relate their own story in a way, even if you haven't been through loss or an autoimmune disease or any of the things that I talk about specifically today. I hope that the listeners, that you sense an overarching theme of that nothing that the Lord does goes to waste, and nothing that he does is random. So my hospitality management degree wasn't random. It's so much a fulfillment of my desires and my gifts and talents. So I majored in that. I worked for a couple of years. My husband and I got married really young, and we had learned about natural family planning. Me, especially as a child growing up, or as a teen growing up, my mom actually had us learn when we were high schoolers, which was a big deal. It was like a really weird thing to a lot of people, that she would teach us that. But we had an instructor come into our group and teach a bunch of young women about their hormone genius, which is super awesome and exactly what you guys are all about. So I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I didn't mute my phone here. Excuse me for 1 minute. Sorry about that. So like I was saying, so we learned in high school. And then when we went through marriage prep, my husband and I are both Catholic. And so it was really important to us to learn about natural family planning. But it was not presented well in our marriage prep classes. It was like, this is going to be marriage insurance, even though it didn't work for us. That's what the presenters said. And they said, so if you ever want to talk to somebody, call your diocese. So we were like, okay, great. We know what we're doing. Our parents have gone through this themselves. We're going to be all set. And then a year went by, a year and a half went by, and we had been open to life that whole time, probably actively hoping to conceive for probably 6 to 8 months, and nothing was happening. So it was at that time that I first learned about naprotechnology, which I know you've talked about on the show before, and that's obviously what Teresa is so involved in. So that was my first exposure. And I remember seeing a napro doctor, and he looked at my charts and just said, I think it's going to be okay. Like, everything's going to be okay. Just keep hoping and trusting. So we ended up losing our first baby. And then shortly after that, found out we were expecting again. So that was obviously that loss was super devastating, as all losses are. But then this quick turnaround of, oh my gosh, here's life again. We weren't expecting that. But as we went on through our marriage, we've been married now almost 10 years, which I really can't believe. But those first 5 years, especially, like I said, we went from no babies to 4 babies in 4 years. And we had 2 miscarriages in that time. So it was really 6 babies in 4 years. And it was a wild, wild time. So many diapers. We had 4 in diapers because I didn't have the brain power to potty train a 4-year-old or a 3-year-old while I was nursing a newborn. And it was just crazy. But we look back at it with so much joy, just so much joy, and so many happy memories, and also just amazed at how the Lord gave us everything we needed to get through that time. But kind of the biggest part of this whole story is that we had learned about natural family planning, but we decided that we weren't going to be super specific in using it. And part of that was because of my health. We couldn't figure out my cycles. They just didn't make sense to us. So even being an empowered woman, as you might say, knowing my cycles from my high school years, I still couldn't figure them out. And I never committed enough to digging into the root of it, because by the time I'd either find an instructor or somebody would look at my charts, I'd be pregnant again, or I'd be nursing, or I'd be in a weird postpartum phase or something like that. So we never really committed to it. And it was kind of a joke, as I'm sure you can all imagine, like, oh, 4 kids in 4 years, of course you guys didn't figure it out. But it really wasn't that. Everything was such a surprise. It was that we were just in a season of a lot of grace to be just kind of accepting of whatever came our way. And it's hard to fathom that, but really the Lord provided so much grace in that time, and grace for the moment. So anyone listening who thinks like, oh, I could never do that. Whenever people say that to me about anything in terms of 4 babies in 4 years or juggling all these things, I say to them, I could never do that either, but the Lord can. He just asks us to say yes. So it's hard to remember that, and even harder to put it into practice. But I hope that's a good takeaway today, that if you are feeling like, oh gosh, well, I could never do that. I think it's easy to think that about a lot of people that we put on pedestals. I could never do that, but the Lord equips us. So,
Ellen, can I pause you just for a second? I kind of want to, if you don't mind, just dig in on a thought there. And because you mentioned just like your pre-marriage class and kind of the stigma that was around already natural family planning. And even though you had actually been informed about it, and you knew kind of like that was a stigma, I think other people in your class may have not have taken it the same way as you, because you actually came informed. Yeah. But I mean, part of the discussion, Ellen, we've had in the past is just that it can be so hard for people discerning going into natural family planning, what's the right approach to take to their fertility? How do I discern, how to be open to life, how many children to have, like that approach that we take in trying to listen to God and listen to our spouse and what the needs are of our family. And I know that you're really passionate about that at this point. And it's because of your own experience and the graces that you've received. So give us a little bit of where you've kind of been and where you've kind of come through to the point where I really think like this is a gift that you can provide to other women and couples that, you know, we can work with God and as a team, as a family to kind of really feel out what's best for us. And it doesn't have to look the same way for every family. And I think that's the key is we can kind of feel this pressure. You got to have 8 kids or, you know, you got to look like the family next door. And that is not true. Like each individual unique family is their own. And we know that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a good point to make. And yes, that's exactly kind of the heart of my whole message is that in that time, if you had talked to me in the throes of that time, I wouldn't be saying any of this because I didn't understand it. And we actually had a joke that, okay, at this rate, by the time, you know, we married so young, it was like, by the time I reach menopause, we're going to have 30 kids. And I mean, that's a joke, of course, but it really started to feel that way. And I definitely don't want to make it sound like in what I'm saying today, that it was easy or that we just were like, oh, whatever the Lord wants. There were a lot of tears and a lot of time meeting with priests in the confessional and saying, I don't know what to do because I just found out I'm pregnant again. And of course, not to say we didn't want that child, but just that sheer fear of how can we do this again? And what are people going to say and think and everything else? So I certainly don't want to sugarcoat it. It was hard, really, really hard. But all of that to say that once we came through that time, after our 4th baby was born, that's when my health issues really started to appear. And we had a preterm baby in that time, born at 32 weeks. And a lot of different things happened. So I was on heavy supplements like progesterone and different things like that to help my body sustain a pregnancy. And after our 4th was born in 2017, that's when we just noticed that something needed to change. So this is that was like the precursor to the actual story for today, kind of laying the foundation. Everything that we went through this last 3 years, which I'll get into in a minute, is what has led us to this better understanding of the Lord's heart, especially for NFP and for married couples and for discerning couples. So I'd like to emphasize that before I really dig into it, that it was this whole journey of learning more about the Lord's heart and not just that, oh, the Lord said, be fruitful and multiply. And that was it. He has so much more to say to us personally, individually, uniquely, especially as women. So going back then to my story, our last baby was born. And then for 1.5 years, we went on this really intensive health journey to figure out what was wrong with me. And part of that was getting a diagnosis with neprotechnology of polycystic ovarian syndrome. And also they suspected endometriosis, but as you just mentioned in your last episode, it has to be diagnosed with a laparoscopy. So I ended up having a laparoscopy. I say that it was a miraculous surgery because the doctor went in surgery and they found leftover scar tissue instead of what they actually thought was endometriosis. And we had prayed many, many prayers for a full and complete healing, specifically of endo. So that was a huge gift. They did a bilateral ovarian wedge resection, which if you have PCOS, that's definitely something to look into. We say that it changed our lives. It changed our marriage because, again, we went from not understanding what my body was doing, not understanding when ovulation was occurring or multiple ovulation or LH surges were taking place. And it just made charting an NFP so difficult. And with this ovarian wedge resection, it took my cycles from anywhere between 60 and 75 days down to clockwork 28 to 30 days, which is remarkable. And anyone who has long or irregular cycles can only imagine. I mean, you can empathize with that. Just a tremendous joy it is. I cry almost every time I get my period. It's probably the hormone crash, but it's also like, I can't believe that my body's actually doing what it was made to do. This is so remarkable because for so many years it wasn't, and I didn't even realize it. So that was a huge part of the journey. After my surgery, I ended up finding out that I had an autoimmune disease. So going on that whole journey of trying to find better answers, which believe it or not, so many doctors prescribed birth control for my autoimmune disease, which doesn't make any sense. But I finally found, pretty much through my own digging, and of course this was through, I like to call him my advocate, our advocate, the Holy Spirit, inspiring us to just keep going deeper. We joke that we went down this rabbit hole and we never came out. We just keep going deeper in this health journey of, okay, what else can we figure out the root cause of? So during that time, we started an autoimmune protocol diet, which is really more of like a lifestyle than a diet. And that took me into what I would call remission. It's not obviously a total healing, but it's like a dormant time of this disease. So that's been remarkable. My husband and kids did it with me, which was quite a feat. But we all went in, did it, cut everything out, which anyone who knows AIP knows it's super, super intensive. So that was a huge
examples. Can you give us some examples of like what you cut out? And
yeah, I could talk about that for hours. But it's no grains, no dairy, no eggs, no sugar, refined sugars, no gluten, no soy, no beans, no nightshades, which is potatoes and peppers. So it's really, really specific, like meats, fruits, and vegetables, but even then, not all. So it's really specific, but it was an incredible transformation. I saw 10 doctors over the course of a year to try to get better answers, and then ended up at University of Michigan, and they were supposed to be the best of the best to help me figure this out. And they offered me birth control, sterilization, and steroids for life. Those were my 3 options. So that's when we said, okay, we've had enough. There's got to be something better. So we went on this wild, crunchy ride, and here we are. So it's been 2 years now. We've been on this autoimmune protocol diet. We've, kind of ebbed and flowed with it, how intense we've stuck to it. But when we start to get lax on it, my symptoms start to come back. So it's a really good affirmation that it's working.
What's that diet called though? You called it IP something.
Yeah, AIP, the autoimmune protocol diet.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone is struggling with an autoimmune disease, that would be something to look into for sure. Even if it gave you a little bit of reprieve, it gave me the boost that I needed to keep going, because when you're sick and you don't feel good and you're struggling to find answers, something like that to say, okay, I'm putting in all this energy to the way I'm eating. It then gave me more energy. It seems counterintuitive, but it gave me more energy to keep digging. So again, this is still, I feel like, a background to the actual story. But we got through all of that. My husband was also diagnosed with an autoimmune disease during that time that we only discovered because he did this with me. So that was such a gift. So then together we were kind of each other's cheerleader, like, okay, you're going to do this and I'm going to do this, and we're going to get better for the sake of these 4 babies we have. And during that time, we were just feeling so called to wait to become pregnant again, especially as my cycles had become more regular. Then we realized, okay, we can actually do this. We can figure out my charts. We can get an instructor and get to the bottom of how to do this. So our youngest is almost 4, and it's really amazing how like NFP actually works when your body's working for you and when you stick to it. So we waited for a really long time in that season of really trying to get to the root of my health issues. And then it was actually this time last year, we felt really called, just kind of out of the blue, after months and months and months of just hearing not yet from the Lord in our prayer. He's like, the time is now. Like, it's time. And I couldn't believe it. I ended up getting a spiritual director because I was so, I was like, there's no way, because he's been saying no for so long. And now he's saying, are you ready? And it was never, of course, like this forceful thing. It was always posed as an invitation, like the months or the weeks that we were discerning. It was never like, you have to have this baby. It was, I have this gift for you. Would you like it? And that was a huge turning point for us, because in the past, it was always like, oh, I'm pregnant. It was never like, oh, should we not? It was just like, okay, we were open to this, and now here we are. So that really felt like a cooperation with God, instead of just like receiving a gift that I didn't really ask for. This was like oh, he's actually inviting us into this. So we had time to pray about it, and that was about the time that I reached out to Teresa, probably more specifically, was to say, okay, I have this autoimmune disease. It's actually linked to progesterone, which I need to sustain a pregnancy. And I don't know how this is going to go. This is going to be really scary because I'm going to start pumping my body with this thing that's attacking my body. So that was a huge trust walk. And long story short, we ended up conceiving. It was a beautiful, exciting announcement and journey. And then we ended up losing our baby, Catherine, at 9 weeks. And there was a whole trauma with her delivery and the loss of her. She was delivered at home in the midst of COVID. And then I ended up hemorrhaging really severely at home and had to be taken by ambulance because everything happened really, really fast. So again, in the middle of COVID, and my husband couldn't come with me. And a really key part of this story was that during my time in the hospital, trying to be stabilized and everything else, there was so much red tape because of COVID. And I remember sobbing after they had to have an emergency DNC kind of bedside surgery. I remember sobbing to the Lord and saying, I have no one to advocate for me. There's no one here to speak on my behalf. I'm totally alone. My husband, they were trying to call him, but we were in like the basement of the hospital and they couldn't reach him. And there were all these decisions that needed to be made. And I thought, what if I'm not communicating properly? I had a mask on my face and they didn't know what to do. And there were just so many things that happened in that hospital stay that I was just crying out to the Lord. I have no one to advocate on my behalf. And that becomes important later on in the story because about a week after I got home, the readings were, I don't have the actual quote, I wish I did, but from the Bible, I think it's in the Gospel of John, and the Lord's talking about the Holy Spirit coming as the advocate. And he said, and I will give you an advocate to speak on your behalf. And I just remember again sobbing, like he was with me that whole time, empowering me, encouraging me to speak up, because I did have to speak up a lot. Even in my extreme weakness, I had to speak up for myself and say what I wanted and what I didn't want. And I know for sure that was all the Holy Spirit empowering me, giving me the strength and the words to speak. So that lit a fire in my soul. After I came through all of that, we buried our daughter in May of last year. And then we moved away from the area, which was kind of a trauma in and of itself, but also a really beautiful thing because we were able to relocate, at least temporarily, back to where our roots are with our families. And really difficult to leave her grave, but also really healing to have like a brand new start. So that fire in my soul of helping me realize that I didn't need someone else. I had the gifts that I was given through the sacraments and through, especially through the Holy Spirit. I had all of that in me to accomplish what the Lord wanted to accomplish. And that fire in my soul, I was like, this has to be shared. I have to tell women, I have to talk to them about speaking up for themselves and getting the help that they need. Because I think back to years ago, especially before my PCOS surgery, if I hadn't done that, which was such a dilemma for me, how can I take this time away from my kids? I can't. I have 4 babies who need me. And I think as women, we carry so many burdens, and so much of the pressure is on us, even with an extremely supportive husband, that we have to do it all, and we can't take care of ourselves, and we can't, there's no time to figure out your cycles, and you just have to have the babies the Lord sends. And there's so many mixed messages, I think, in the church and in society. And I was so empowered in that whole journey of realizing that by leaning into this wholeness that the Lord wanted for me, then I was able to give so much more to those around me. And so now here I am, after going through all of this and realizing that that whole journey the Lord used to bring me and to like really stoke that flame to get to this point now where I do that on the side. So I encourage women. I call myself a cheerleader of the heart because I think so many women just need someone like I had along the way saying, you can do this. You are worthy of this. You're worthy of this time. You're worthy of this surgery. You're worthy of, figuring out your cycles. You don't have to carry this burden of just, oh, well, the Lord just keeps sending all these babies, or this burden of, well, they said I could never have kids, but I've never, seen a NAPRO doctor, or I've never taken the time to dig deeper, or they told me that my thyroid was fine, but I know something's wrong. Really encouraging them and empowering them to say, you know what, going back to that feminine genius, I know something's not right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm worthy of that. And I can do this. And the advocate is with me. So that's where paraclete coaching comes in then. Is paraclete obviously is another word for the Holy Spirit, our advocate. And realizing that, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not any of those things. I'm not even a health coach, but really just someone along the journey to say, you know what, you're doing an amazing job and you are worthy of this time and of digging deeper. So I know that was a lot. That was my really quick Cliff's Notes version of a lot of things that happened, but I'm happy to unpack any of it if you'd like.
Yes. Wow, Ellen, I can't imagine. I love how you really explained that whole empowerment when you're in hospital by yourself, this moment of, okay, I need an advocate. And then here is that revelation of the Holy Spirit as your advocate, that he can speak through you. And I just think that's such an empowering moment, because visually in our minds, we can imagine that's at our most vulnerable. You probably would have felt the most afraid during that time. So
Yeah.
I loved how you explained that whole thing in terms of your journey.
Yeah, and it also just, for everyone out there right now, and for anyone who listens to this a year, it's not, maybe hopefully 2 years, it may not make sense, but this is just such a unique time. And isn't it going to be amazing how we're going to have to unpack women's stories in the pandemic in a way that you wouldn't unpack them without the pandemic. And your story of miscarriage is a prime example of how even the people in that room with you, there was confusion, fear, because we're in this new kind of territory of how do I deal with the person, and then I have all these other things I have to think about. So it made it complicated, and that could have happened to so many women out there right now who are listening and thinking, I felt so alone, and I didn't feel like I had someone that could speak for me because I was alone because of this crazy pandemic virus that we're dealing with currently. And so I just think that's important that, and that's something I think, Ellen, you can help people with, is just unpacking their stories, right? Because we know that part of listening to the Holy Spirit is just digging down into who we are as human beings and how we're made, and taking the time to be silent, and taking the time to just really kind of think about what this life is about, what our purpose is, what our calling is, what our destiny is. And so many times we're just so busy as moms, right? We're just flying through our days. We don't even have time to be silent and to take that time. So it's a really good message for women.
Yeah. Something that's coming up in my heart to share too is a really specific phrase or words that a friend spoke to me that spoke light into my fear, into my dark time. Right when we were discerning about whether or not I should have this PCOS surgery, I was texting my friend who is also my NFP instructor. She's been with us now for probably 5 years, and she's never going to leave me. But I was texting her, telling her how nervous I was, that I had to commit to this surgery and it was going to be months and months and months away. And it was just so scary. And what if I was pregnant by then and everything else? And she just simply said to me, Ellen, the Lord longs for your wholeness. And that, when I think about paraclete coaching and what I want women to hear is words like that, of one person speaking that light into, or really just the truth that I needed to be reminded of. It wasn't about me And whether or not, oh, I could take the time or this money or that or whatever else, all these other circumstances, it was at the end of the day, the Lord wants our wholeness for all of us. And that it wasn't selfish for me to, oh, well, how healthy is healthy enough? And he doesn't speak in those terms. He wants our wholeness. So that gave me so much empowerment to say, okay, you know what? He does. He longs for my wholeness. And this doctor that I trust, this NAPRO doctor, has told me that this is the path to wholeness. And actually, the crazy thing is that the week that I ended up having that surgery, we relocated out of town, away from our families, all in that same time. And if I had known that, I mean, this was booked 6 months in advance. If I had known that, I never, ever would have imagined doing all of that. And yet, look how it all happened. The Lord provided and gave us the support that we needed. So even in the midst of a move with 4 babies, again, it was just an amazing time to see how that healing came, that wholeness came, even in a time of so much up and down and unknowns.
I really want to dig into this idea of, this so there's the culture where, typically, if we can get a quick fix on our fertility, we have the freedom and everything will be fine. What I mean by that is, say, give me a pill so I don't need to have a baby. Okay, that's like sometimes where we are surrounded by. Right. But like with the Hormone Genius podcast, we're trying to share the message of no, like this story of wholeness, like, no, your body is whole. Like if it's not presenting itself in that way, then let's work toward that wholeness. And our body deserves more than a quick fix. We can kind of get to the root of this. Okay. So it's kind of like our noises are combating each other in the culture. And it's only due to a lack of knowledge and a lack of education, really, honestly. And that's, again, why we feel called to this. The reason I'm prefacing what I'm going to say next is this whole idea of, but on the flip end, there's this culture where some women are, where it's that pressure of, okay, I am charting my fertility. I'm not going to alter or suppress my feminine design, but how many babies is like realistic for me in this moment? And so I really want to address that, because I think a lot of people listening probably maybe have that like keeping up with the Joneses sort of deal when it comes to family size.
Yeah, that's a huge topic. So yeah, this is another piece of the whole story that I'm so passionate about. And actually, this is, I think, the original piece that Teresa and I talked about is, so I went through the miscarriage and then this whole relocation and kind of finding this new sense of freedom. I was working with the therapist who works at Pope Paul VI Institute for counseling. And that was a tremendous part of wholeness. Like I mentioned, my spiritual director as well. It was all these different parts of me that needed healing from that trauma and just also from the burdens of life. So I worked with both of them. And I made the joke often, like, I feel so extra. I have all these people that I have to rely on, but it was truly just a joke because I realized how much they helped me get me to this point of whole healing, where now I can see the freedom that the Lord has invited us to, and also being able to discern way more freely than we ever have been before. So to give a little bit more detail into that, after we lost Catherine, we abstained for a long time because we were waiting for my cycle to come back. And then when it did, I just kind of naturally assumed that we would get pregnant again, because that was how it had been in the past. I had the 2 miscarriages in between our 4 babies. And again, I was kind of in this previous mindset of, okay, we were on this trajectory, we were having all these babies, and that's just like what the Lord wants me to do, I guess. I was raised in a large family. There were 10 kids originally, and then my parents adopted 4. So I'm one of 14 now.
Wow.
And it's beautiful and such an incredible gift. But the Lord gave me such an insight and freedom into realizing that their calling is not my calling. And my parents never, forced that on me or anything like that. But it's just, that was my, the grounds on which I was raised. And I just thought, like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do too. That's what mom did. So that's what I'll do. And again, it was never anything they said. I just assumed that role. And so after we lost Catherine, it was like, okay, well, when's the next baby coming?
Mm.
And in my prayer and in our discernment, the Lord just kept saying, not yet, not yet. And I was so confused because we had gone from this invitation, from the Lord, okay, will you be open to this life? And then obviously that life, it bore a lot of fruit, but not on this side of heaven, and not understanding what was all that about. And then coming through this whole time of healing through counseling and spiritual direction to understand that I'm not just like a baby making machine. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I didn't realize, even in my wholeness and this healthy view of myself, that that's what I believed was my mission in life. That was my calling in life, was just to have a lot of babies, which I don't even mean to add the word just, because it's such a beautiful thing. But I had never discerned it for myself. I had never said to the Lord, do you actually want this? Or do I just think this about myself, that being open to life means having all the babies? And that's like, I think the cornerstone of this whole conversation is speaking that truth to women, whoever's listening, that giving that to the Lord, whether it's you are scared of having all the babies, or you want to have all the babies, or you can't have all the babies, or whatever your situation is, giving your fertility to the Lord. I used to think that meant, okay, I'm going to hand it over to him, and now it's just going to be like baby, 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 and it's never going to end. And this whole season that we're in right now is the most open I've ever felt to life in my heart, without feeling called to conceive. And that was the exact conversation Teresa and I had of, it's like this paradox that I've never encountered in my life or in our marriage, even 10 years in now, of saying, wait a minute, we are so open to life and so open to whatever the Lord wants to do in our hearts, because I have this wholeness, and because we have this understanding and this maturity in our relationship and in our marriage, and this stability in our family. But at the same time, the Lord is saying, I don't want you to actively conceive. Of course, we could, if we wanted to, the Lord would work with whatever we decided, but there's not the invitation to be open to that right now. So I hope that's not too confusing, because it sounds like opposite. How could that be both and? But it is. And what the Lord just continues to show me in our life right now is that he doesn't just bear life through us as women, specifically through babies. He does a lot of times. And that's one of the, incredible gifts of the feminine genius, is the ability to bear life, but it's not just human life. And this whole past Christmas, especially, when I was praying during Advent, I just thought, okay, when I start to pray about being open and preparing my heart for the Lord, that's when he's just going to step in and be like, okay, Ellen, it's time to get pregnant again. I want you to be open to this. And instead, the whole Advent and Christmas season was about receiving him into like the womb of my heart, this space in my heart that was just so ready for whatever he wanted. And he just stepped in and said, I am what you have been longing for, and filling that void. And now, again, in this new season of my life where I'm encouraging and coaching other women to really dig into their dignity, that is, I wouldn't have that without having the wholeness of the Lord filling that space. So I've been resting in that, and I've cried a lot about it, because it's such a beautiful and also painful thing, to realize that, okay, I thought that I would have a dozen kids, and I'm still young, and people tell me like, oh, you have so much time. But anyone who's in this situation of longing for something that the Lord isn't willing right now, like, I don't want to say that it's the same as infertility, because I know that that's an entirely different cross, but it's this longing of, okay, I had this plan and this vision for my family. The Lord's giving me something profoundly better. I mean, this time that we're in right now is so full of life. I can't even contain it. There's so much joy, and there's so much freedom, and feeling called to just pour into our community in a way that we couldn't do if we had an infant, or if I was pregnant right now. And I'm just blown away by how I think I was limiting God in my, as hard as that is to think that, okay, having a baby is limiting God. In my situation, it is, because there was something so much bigger that he wanted to do. So I would really challenge anyone listening, if you're kind of in this unrest. For me, there was this initial fear. Okay, if I hand this over to him, well, then I'm just going to have all the babies. Or if I hand that over to him, then it's going to be that. I'm so quick to put the end on the story. And my spiritual director often corrects me on that. She'll say, stop limiting God. It's such a pride thing that I have to work on, that I'm so quick to tie it up in a red bow and say, oh, well, this is what he wants. When in reality, what he wants is me right here and now in this wholeness to share his love. And that's it. That's like full stop. And it's such a privilege. And I'm so humbled to realize that he made me for more than what I had thought. It's not just, yeah.
It goes, I mean, like, just to the essence of the dignity of the human person, but particularly for women, you know, and because in our current culture, fertility is looked at as broken or bad, or even in our world, sometimes with bigger Catholic families, it can be the opposite. Again, you can't have children, so now you're broken. And I think it was profound when you said that, you know, Ellen, to me, I'd never heard a woman say, you know, I can be open to life in my heart and not have a child. I've certainly worked with so many women with infertility and had the conversation of, just because you cannot physically bear a child does not mean that you do not bring life to the world. And so it ultimately comes down to the dignity of the human person, and their vocation is to bring love and life to the world, but it doesn't look the same for each individual human being. And it's through the listening to the heart. And even if you are not Catholic or even not religious per se, this is not something that you cannot, you know, you can capture what we're talking about in a non-religious way, because it really is something it's truth. We all want to have purpose, right? We all desire human connection and relationship. So we're all going to find who we are more through love and bringing life to the world and service to the world. And for you right now, this paraclete and working with women ministry is your way of bringing life to the world. And it will, you know, it brings the essence of the dignity of who you are, Ellen, you know, to other people. And that is beautiful. And we just thank you so much for sharing that. And we hope that this really does bring a peace to people's hearts, to women's hearts, and that they stop and think, you know, again, we're so busy in our lives, and silence sometimes is not easily obtained in our current world with all the noise and confusion. So take a moment to give some silence to your heart so that you can hear the Paraclete, hear the Holy Spirit, and what is he calling you to? So thank you so much, Ellen, for that. And I think Jamie wants to probably ask one more question.
Yes. Question we ask everyone we interview. Ellen, what do you wish every woman knew about her hormone genius?
There's so much, but the biggest thing I think is realizing, going back to that story that I shared, that realizing that the Lord longs for your wholeness. And that wholeness, I think, like I said, we put an adjective to that. We say, okay, my wholeness would come with this noun or this adjective describing what that wholeness looks like. And what I would encourage every woman listening to is giving your feminine genius to the Lord and asking him to show you what your feminine genius looks like. Because again, I think we compartmentalize and we put ourselves into boxes. I'm the mom of the big family, or I'm the one who's infertile, or I'm the one who, whatever, I'm the one who lost a baby. And giving that to the Lord and letting him reveal how he wants to bear life through you. And whatever that is going to take your feminine genius to like the nth degree. Like, to me, I feel more wholly a woman and more fully free than I've ever felt in my entire life, even in that time of bearing children back to back, or even in the time of loss. This time of it's seemingly barren to the outside world because I'm not bearing children, but I'm bearing more life. The Lord is bearing more life through me than ever before in different ways. So I just encourage you to open your hearts to that, because the Lord has so much more than we limit him to.
Awesome. Thank you, Ellen, so much for sharing your story. It's a powerful story. And I loved the womb of your heart. I wrote that down because I just thought that was beautiful, of receiving what the Lord's will is. And it's beyond often what we imagine. So thank you so much for taking time with us today, Ellen. We'll include your social media information too, so that people can follow you and get in connection with you if they're feeling called through this podcast. And Teresa, of course, it's good to see you as always. And everyone just have a really wonderful, wonderful day. Thanks, Ellen.
Thank you.